Hello, friends. Patrick here again. Sorry for the shaky start here. We're in our final video number 7, and we're hitting chapter 20 in the book. I believe there's only 23 chapters, so we'll get through this as quick as we can. He starts off with a quote from Matthew chapter 5. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Funny, because he constantly slapping Christians on the cheek throughout his book, whenever he gets the chance, that is. And talking more about the developments of the particle accelerator in Switzerland, CERN, and France. And he talks about the breaking of the gauge symmetry and the technical aspects of the studies that they did about the Higgs field and the W and Z particles, and how they possibly give rise to their existence. And so chapter 20 is again a very complicated discussion of high-level physics, subatomic physics. Chapter 21, Gothic cathedrals of the 21st century. The price of wisdom is above rubies is the quote that he uses to start this chapter. And when he's referring to Gothic cathedrals, he's talking about the particle accelerators. They're so massive and huge, and he includes some pictures of them. They're like cathedrals, and of course he considers them to be cathedrals. And this is a very interesting chapter, exciting chapter, because it goes through 12 different stats on the characteristics of this large hadron collider, and just, some of the amazing characteristics of it. The amount of, 96 tons of superfluid, and the vacuum that is developed, and the speed that they process these particles up to a speed of 0.999999 times the speed of light, right? 600 million particle collisions per second, and all the tonnage and the magnetic coils take up the distance was stretched to the sun and moon back. All these amazing stuff. I won't go through all of them because that's a great part of the book that makes the book worth purchasing as a reference, is some of these amazing characteristics of these massive accelerators. And he says the cathedrals in the past were built to celebrate the glory of God, and the cathedrals of the particle accelerator is meant to celebrate and explore the beauty of nature. He introduces, whenever he gets stuck in their discoveries, he reverts to nature, and then he calls nature as she. He says, nature, she decided to make it this way. But he stubbornly resists making any reference to God, even though he's exposed to the marvelousness of God's creation probably 100 times more than the average person. So that's chapter 21. And again, he finishes the chapter by saying that these things are hidden in what seems like empty space, indeed like nothing. That's straight out of Hebrews 11, right? Remember that verse that I said summarizes all of Lisa Randall's book, I should say, singular, that the things that are made up of the things that are not? He almost quotes the same thing in his discovery. He said, maybe even these discoveries will force us to change our view of ourselves and our place in the universe. He says, hidden in what seems like empty space, indeed like nothing, which is getting more interesting all the time, are the very elements that allow for our existence. So see, the title of the book is Why Are We Here? And really what he's saying is why we can be here. Why can we be here, right? Or essentially how we are here. And that brings me to chapter 22, actually, where on page 276, he says, whenever scientists ask why, we really mean how, right? So, and he could also say, why is the Higgs here, or the Higgs field, or the Higgs boson? The standard model gives no answer to this question. So he says, whenever scientists ask why, we really mean how. So the title, Why Are We Here? What he's really trying to answer, both as a physicist and as a writer, is the question, how are we here? He never attempts to answer the question, why are we here? Because that is a metaphysical question. And he's unwilling to reference anything that deals with the metaphysical. He's unwilling to deal with anything that may deal with God creating us from nothing. He's so stubborn. And you'll see a little later that it goes beyond stubbornness. To my shock, he actually goes beyond stubbornness. So let's continue quickly through. We're now on chapter 22 that he introduces with a quote from Proverbs. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. That's a good quote from Prophet Solomon, I guess. More questions than answers is the name of chapter 22. So he admits there are more questions than answers, right? It just keeps going and going and going. He mentions that supernovae are the brightest cosmic fireworks in the sky when they explode. Remember when we talked about the nature of reality and the universe being like cosmic fireworks? Well, he confirms my view of the universe in that statement on page 280. Then we move on to page 282, where he says, for grand unification to take place, some new physics at energy scales beyond those that we have observed thus far must exist. So he's saying that, they don't have all the answers, right? He talks again about supersymmetry, introduces the concept of supersymmetry. Higgs observed at the Large Hadron Collider, the Higgs that was observed at the Large Hadron Collider has a mass about 125 times the mass of the proton. And then he introduces at the bottom of 285, one of the bigger mysteries in cosmology is the nature of the dark matter that appears to dominate the mass of all the galaxies that we can see. And he mentions some calculations that he and others, he mentions, performed more than 30 years ago that showed that remnant abundance today of the lightest supersymmetric particle left over after the Big Bang would naturally be in the range so that it could be in the dark matter dominating. So he's trying to take credit here of some calculations he did 30 years ago that would point to dark matter. I guess he's still trying to drop some hints that he deserves a Nobel Prize. It doesn't say on his bio that he's won a Nobel Prize yet, which is very strange. He must be pretty pissed about that because he's kind of saying, hey, how come I didn't get my Nobel Prize yet? Maybe he'll get one soon. And then he finishes that chapter 22 by mentioning again that in which we find ourselves may not only resemble, at least metaphorically, an ice crystal on a window pane, it may be almost as ephemeral. So he keeps coming back to that analogy. He thinks that we're just an ice crystal on a window pane that's in between phase transitions, when it almost freezes. He does introduce some really cool analogies about phase transition, which are very interesting. At chapter 23, here we go. I think this is the last chapter. From a beer party to the end of time. He quotes, he starts the chapter with a quote from 1 Corinthians, for the fashion of this world passes away. Again, imagine how that must strike him as a physicist. These metaphysical statements made in scriptures, many different places over and over again, speaking to his conscience about the nature of reality, and him pushing it away and saying, oh no, we can only deal with physics. All these metaphysical statements, I can't incorporate them. So the reason why he would include all those statements at the beginning of every chapter of his book is beyond my comprehension. He in this chapter, he talks about his previous book, A Universe from Nothing. He mentions again a statement that is very similar to Hebrews 11. He says that the universe resides in empty space, and we currently have no idea how it arises. This is from the last chapter in the book. The universe resides in empty space, and we currently have no idea how it arises. Right? He's saying that this is the greatest story ever told. And he says, saying that why are we here? First of all, he doesn't address this question. He's addressing the question of how we're here. And the story, the greatest story ever told, is the story of our redemption by our loving Creator and how he's able to create this reality for us. So he's totally missing the forest for the trees. He's talking about a story of struggle and experimentation and partial discoveries here and partial discoveries there, and some very interesting and insightful discoveries, to be sure, but no different from the discoveries of electricity by Benjamin Franklin or gravity by Galileo and Newton. They're a sequence of discoveries through time, and we're learning more and more about our reality. But for him to come out and call his book that is presumptuous at the least, and just flippant at worst, I suppose. I don't know. Anyway, so talks about the cosmic microwave background, which also Lisa Randall talked about in her book. And he talks about the 100 billion or so galaxies in the visible universe. Yeah, so here in this chapter, he uses some analogies for inflation, which are very, very insightful. I think are very cool. I don't know who came up with them, but about the changing of state from water to a solid and that temporary time in between. He introduces that as being related to what they call inflation. Physicists use the term inflation, not like economists use for the economic situation, but no, inflation as far as the rapid expansion that occurred at the early stages of our universe. They call that inflation, from the moment of the Big Bang to when it increased many fold in size. So he mentions a paper that he wrote with Frank Wilczek, talking about symmetry breaking scale and trying to relate it to the grand unified theory. They're still trying to put together this grand unified theory, even talking, perhaps introducing the concept of other universes, turning what is now metaphysics into physics. So they start talking about other universes are possible, and it's just as much. It's a further out explanation for reality than anything that's contained within the Bible, right? Once they get into that type of tail chasing, then all bets are off at that point. So then here, the energy in the final chapter 23, the energy of empty space implies nothing mystical, right? So he backtracks again. He starts getting into the mystical, but he says, "Oh, wait a minute, no, it's not anything mystical. As I have said, lack of understanding is not evidence for God." He keeps going back to this crybaby quote that he likes to use, saying, "Oh, just because we don't understand something doesn't mean there's God out there." He says we're free to hope for the best, and he finishes up. He makes a statement here. He says, all the answers to all of them are the same. We don't know, right? We don't know is his answer, right? He doesn't want to get into anything that might hint at some type of metaphysical explanation, because that's anathema to him, right? And saying, even to speculate to the point where they reach points where, if there's a phase change, maybe the universe is just going to disappear instantaneously. Oh no, as if they have anything to do with it. The sustainability of the universe, as if their theories and their discoveries have anything to do with that possibility. It gets a little bit ridiculous at the end of the chapter. So the funny thing is that the thing that shocked me was that at the end of the chapter, he goes in and he mentions that, he makes a statement: the universe doesn't give a damn what we would like or whether we survive. And he really reveals what you could only describe as hardcore atheism, right? He mentions again that he imagines that we're living on the spine of an ice crystal on the window pane that he described earlier. He keeps coming back to that, his view that's what we're like. And he said, and it would be no doubt be celebrated by the theologians in such a society as an example of God's love. But of course, he goes against that. Digging deeper, they might discover that there's other circumstances on other ice crystals that exist with other directions are favored. So he keeps fighting against the idea that our universe has any kind of somehow favoritism towards the existence of light, of life. He just wants to delete that from even speaking it. So he goes to the point where he's not only foolish and wrong for abandoning any reference to God, but he actually reveals a deep type of evil in his, promotion of the concept that the universe doesn't give a damn whether we live or survive. This impersonal perception of the universe, as far as he is concerned, is that nobody cares about you. You're just here all on your own. You're just a speck in the middle of this chaotic world, and that we don't even know how it came into existence. You just popped out of nothing, and your very existence is absolutely meaningless as far as the universe is concerned. That is an evil type of philosophy, and it is a philosophy. There's no doubt about it. A physicist is a philosopher at specific times out of necessity, right? When they're looking at their discoveries, they are forced to dwell on what they have discovered and say, why is this like this? And to come to the conclusion that the universe, in his own words, doesn't give a damn, that's really an evil type of thinking. And then we move into the epilogue, and it becomes even clearer, right? He tries to pretend that he's humble when actually he isn't. This is what I find extremely remarkable. I'm going to finish this video with this, is that, imagine this, he says, as fate would have it, I'm writing these final words while sitting at the desk at which my late friend and co-conspirator in the battle against myth and superstition, Christopher Hitchens. Remember who Christopher Hitchens is, one of the most militant atheists that I ever studied. He's sitting at the same desk where Christopher Hitchens wrote, God is not great. He calls it his masterpiece. And he says, it's hard not to feel his presence channeling these words. He feels like there's this presence from Christopher Hitchens. He's sitting at his desk, and he feels his presence channeling these words as he's finishing his book, saying that the universe doesn't care about you. And where do you think that channeling spirit comes from? I would say it comes directly from Lucifer. Right? He goes on to say, and he says, this reminds me that these feelings just come from inside from my head and not from anything more cosmically significant. He says that his own significance is nothing, right? And this is how he makes a claim to humility. And so the human stories about God also pale in comparison to the real greatest story ever told. He keeps going back to that and saying, my story about physics is the greatest story ever told. The story of me and my colleagues making these new discoveries about particles is the greatest story ever told. It's greater than your story about God in the ancient scriptures. What a fool. He has put himself on the path towards hell, whether hell is actual flames or simply the flames of regret. He has put himself on the same path as Christopher Hitchens. That hell of regret when they meet their creator face to face and they realize that they've been wrong, and they weep and wail and howl and say, oh God, what have I done? That's hell. I've experienced a taste of that hell. I tasted it, and it's a bad, bad place to be in when you recognize that God is real and that we are simply a vapor that's here for a moment. He even begins his epilogue by saying, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. He quotes that from Genesis 3. And then he goes on to say that, there is no, unparalleled solipsism. That without us, the universe is worthless. He's saying this is a horrible way to think, right? And he says we have to overcome our need to be the center of the universe. It's the exact opposite. He is totally wrong in that statement in his epilogue. God has created whoever you are watching this video today. He has created your reality so that you are the center of your universe. It's not an egocentric thing. It's an egoist. It's not egotist. It's not egotistical to think that way. It is an egoism that you are the center of what God has created for you. And he's done it for each point in the universe. Even physics tells us that each point in the universe where they take a measurement, the universe is expanding from that point. So every point is the center of the universe. The earth is the center of the universe. The sun is the center of the universe. Our galaxy is the center of the universe. Not in terms of conforming to the theories of Newton. We know that. We know that, what Galileo proved. We know it's true, that we're not the center of the universe per se, but from a metaphysical aspect. Think about it. You can only see the thought thoughts within your own mind. God made it that way. You cannot just astral travel your thoughts, despite what some people believe that they have these experiences. Perhaps those are possible from a physicist point of view, that there is this spooky action at a distance and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the bare bones of reality. The way that God created us, he loved us so much that he placed us in the garden, the center of what was going on, the center of his attention. You are the center of his attention. He wants to save you. He wants to make your life beautiful. And of all the accomplishments this guy has made, you look at his at the end of the book, it lists about the author. It lists 2 full pages of his accomplishments and his accolades and his awards. I can't help but think of the interview that Ben Stein did with Richard Dawkins, and he said, "What are you going to say to God when he says you've had a pretty good gig here? You know, this guy has had everything. Lawrence Krauss, he's had accolades and honors and professorships, and you know, all these things that he's accomplished. Funny that he served as executive producer on the movie The Unbelievers, a documentary film that discusses science and reason with Richard Dawkins, his friend. You know, these atheists have contributed more to the detriment of humanity and to railroading humanity towards a totalitarian worldview than anybody else. Why? Because there is no care or concern for the individual in atheism. He's a hardcore atheist. He says the individual has no value. The only thing that matters for the atheist, if it does matter at all, is the survival of humanity as a species. And whatever that takes, the state takes precedent. So all power belongs to the state. There is no reason to have any concern whatsoever for the individual. The founding fathers of America, who said that individual rights were important, they hate that. They absolutely detest that, because they say that there is no meaning for the individual. All that matters is perhaps there might be some benefit to having humanity as a species survive, even if it meant, you know, as the Guidestone said, half a billion people, maybe 500 million. That's all they care about, is the survival of the elites. Where does that type of thinking come from? Survival of the fittest. Where does that type of thinking come from? It comes from atheism. And that's what he's promoting. And he's won all these accolades and awards, Humanist of the Year award, and so on and so forth. All these accolades and awards. And what has he accomplished for himself? He has gained the whole world and lost his soul. He is hell-bent on traveling straight to hell, whatever that means. And it's not a good place to be. Because one day, it says that every knee shall bow and declare that Christ is Lord. You either believe that or you don't. One day that's going to come true, right? I know that's a shocking statement to make for a lot of people, and they detest that. They hate that. There's that spirit that rises up and says, we shall not have that man rule over us. It's the same spirit that crucified him. It's the same spirit that comes from the enemy that wants to destroy anything to do with Christianity, Jesus Christ, anything that even mentions that. That is a torture to them. That's like kryptonite to them. They don't want anything to do with that. It rises up out of their spirit, and they wonder where they get the inspiration while he's sitting at Christopher Hitchens' desk. They wonder where that inspiration comes from, where their words come from. It comes from the pit of hell. It comes from Lucifer, Satan, the deceiver of old, that wants to deceive people and say, you have no value. God doesn't care about you. In fact, God is not even real. This is what they want to promote. And this is what we should be on guard against, because this is going to be required reading for any student that wants to study physics and learn about reality. It's a great thing to want to study physics and learn about reality, but it's a horrible thing to want to abandon God. It's a horrible thing to want to abandon our Creator, who created us so lovingly and placed us in the Garden of Eden, which is what it is that we're living in. We're living in this Garden of Eden that we've messed up, that we've destroyed with wars and evil. Study the parable of the tares if you don't understand why evil is here, and you'll know why evil is here, right? There's a part of us that's evil. There's a part of us that's not like God, even though we've been created in his image. And that's what we have to fight against. That part within us that is not like God. That part within us that wants to say, there is no God. I'm not a created thing. He's not the potter. I'm not the clay. That fights back against that. That's the part of us that is the problem, that causes these wars, that causes this conflict. But if we're willing to open our hearts up to God, our Father, and say, God, show me how it is that you've created me and how it is that I can serve you through whatever religion I happen to have been brought up in, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, whether it's Christian, Muslim, Jewish, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we acknowledge our Heavenly Father and recognize what He did for us. It's written down 4 different times what He did for us. Muslims believe in the prophet Jesus. They just maybe have some confusion on the details. Jews are aware of the story, but they see it as perhaps idolatry. Maybe they don't accept it in that they're not ready for it yet. And this gentleman himself has a veil over his eyes. He cannot see the forest for the trees, even though he's exposed to these marvelous aspects of creation that are oblivious to most people. He has them right in front of his face, and he still goes back to Christopher Hitchens' desk and says, oh, the universe doesn't care about you. There is no God. He keeps repeating it over and over again. We're just a crystal on a window pane that's in a phase transition. And there's other crystals all over the place, and they could be just as important as we are, and so on and so forth, to justify his own stubborn, militant atheism that he harbors within his heart. This anger against God for the evil he sees in the world, or for whatever reasons he happens to have. It's a shame and it's a tragedy. How great is that fall? How great is that fall of a soul who abandons their Creator? I pray for this gentleman, Lawrence Krauss, that his eyes would be opened before he leaves the earth, that there is a God who loves him and cares about him just as he does for me and you watching this here today. So we shouldn't get upset. We shouldn't let it bother us, even though you can tell I get a little bit upset by the title and by the statement, why are we here, when he's really trying to discover how we are here. But God bless him. You know, he's achieved great things in his life, and he's been a blessing to himself and his family, his friends, through all his wealth and accolades and accomplishments. And the world has beaten a path to his door, and he's obviously been an extremely successful person. But the condition of his soul is dark and in ignorance of his Creator, which is unfortunate. So I pray for him that God would reveal himself to him somehow before he leaves the earth. Else he end up the same as Christopher Hitchens, who, I guess, left the earth without any change in his belief whatsoever, as far as I know. So that's it. That's my review of this book. It wasn't what I expected. I thought I was going to read an interesting book about physics, and I ended up reading a manifesto of atheism by a world-renowned physicist, just like I did in Lisa Randall's book. Very similar. I keep finding these books that keep coming at me, and I'm going out to a bookstore hopefully later today or tomorrow, and I'm going to be searching for more. But I'm not purposely looking for atheist books. That's just what seems to be come across my path, and so I review them for you here. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. I love you. God loves you. I know that a billion times more than I do. to use a phrase from that book, a billion times is how much God loves you more than anybody else. So thank you for watching. You have yourself a great day. And don't forget, He's made you the center of your universe. Go out and save your world through a big way or a little way, small ways, big ways, and realize that God is loving you every step of the way. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye now. Thanks for watching.